PridePunks are here. The first ever CryptoPunk derivative is being revived, and I'm excited to talk with the founder and creator, Dennison Bertram, who created this in June of 2018. There was only originally two PridePunks that were created, so you do get the provenance of saying the first derivative. The remaining 9,998 are going to be, the whitelist will be opened within the next day or two at the time of this posting, and then out into the public domain of NFT Twitter, where who knows what the message will be received between some of the modern side, some of the historic side, the pride side, where we're going to discuss all of this, because there are quite a few nuances to this that could easily go one way or another. So Dennison, thank you for joining me.
My pleasure. My pleasure.
Wow. I have to say, this is going to be a historic conversation. First, we could start all the way back from the beginning. Just tell us a little bit of who Dennison is.
So in my day-to-day job, I'm the co-founder and CEO of Tally. It's a governance platform. We build tools to make on-chain communities work, like DAOs, make them work. I have been very passionate about DAOs for a very long time. Prior to Tally, I was building a tool called DApp Hero. It's kind of like this low-code, no-code tool for building Ethereum dApps. Unfortunately, it was too early. That was like 2018, 2019. It was a little too early for that. Today, people send me messages all the time like, oh, can I use DApp Hero? I'm like, unfortunately, no, it's gone. Although there is a port of it on Arweave. I've been in the crypto space for a long time. I did one of the first Bitcoin exchanges in the Czech Republic in 2012, which is a really wild story. It was called buybtc.cz. But I've been a lot of things. I was an artist for a long time. I had a technology company around helping fashion brands get into the sort of like tech sphere. So that was a lot of like 3D, a lot of VR kind of stuff, a lot of like digital support. It was at a time when like the industry wasn't yet modern, you would say. Like a lot of the old fashion houses, they were like, family owned. They didn't understand Instagram. They didn't understand websites, stuff that seems pretty silly today, considering how digitally native these big brands are. But years ago they were not. So that's what I did. But just been in crypto for a long time, really passionate, done a lot of things. I'm sure there's other projects that I did way back in the day that I've forgotten about. But this is definitely one of the more exciting ones.
Yeah. So true crypto native, you begin with Bitcoin maximalism and you slowly drift your way into the playground of what Ethereum is.
Yeah. And that's actually relevant because Bitcoin in the early days wasn't about maximalism. It was really about changing the world. And, maybe Bitcoin maxis are going to get really pissed at me for saying all this stuff, but it gradually got more and more unwelcoming. And less fun. Like something that's really important to me is like how fun something is, right? Not in like a silly way, but like, are we changing the world? Is it really interesting? Do we bring more people in? Do people get excited about it? There was a distinct time, I think, I remember like Gavin kind of made a huge mess up with that like fake Satoshi, and the community was just like super, there's just been like, I loved Bitcoin. I still love Bitcoin. Bitcoin's the first, my true love. But, I was around the counterparty days and the color coin days, and, there's so much innovation that, I guess was never going to be a part of like the Bitcoin core philosophy, which is fine, was enabled on Ethereum. And like it just attracted me in a different way. I love this idea of this, world computer. We haven't really said that term, in the recent years, but originally we talked about Ethereum like it's the world computer, this global computer. And certainly once upon a time it was affordable too. So you could like, you could do these like really fun experiments and really fun things on it. And it just felt like, wow, this is so cool,
Vitalik has gotten away from the messaging of the world computer, it drifted away, DeFi came in, and now we have NFTs. And now I see he's trying to kind of bring that vision back. And I see he's been a lot of his messaging around like public goods and social media networks, and kind of trying to detach himself from just the financial properties that exist, which is cool. You know, that's kind of what it is. And he also keeps it weird. I don't know if you go to ETH Denver, see any of these, he keeps that culture very welcoming.
You know, I have been to many ETH Denvers. I had a post that kind of blew up maybe a couple months back, maybe not even that long ago, where I was just giving like props to Vitalik for keeping it weird. People don't, and this is a big part of what PridePunks was about, but signaling that you are not that you are not the weirdest person in the room. Like by Vitalik signaling that you are not the weirdest person in the room. You know, the pink unicorns, you know, the silly dances on stage, the really bad hip hop raps, you know, this stuff that people mock is so key and critical. I used to be a developer advocate for Open Zeppelin, is so critical to the messaging of Ethereum is a place where everyone is welcome. Right. And that kind of messaging enables just incredible stuff, because you just get like the diversity of human ideas, of human personalities, of human representation, all that stuff. And you know, we'll talk a little bit about it, but that was a big part of the inspiration behind PridePunks. But yeah, Vitalik, you know, that is the secret weapon of Ethereum, that it is available for all. And I think DeFi muddled that message. Right. Like I think DeFi was extremely important. It still is extremely important, and is a huge part of the engine that proves, you know, Ethereum as the backbone of the future to like the wider world. Right. Like if we were just trading NFTs, right, and there hadn't been DeFi, like people wouldn't be taking it seriously the way that they do now. Right. So yeah, mad props to Vitalik.
Yeah, that layer 0, or the social consensus layer, is not something that could be replicated and only has to grow organically. Before PridePunks, you mentioned that you were around the color coin days and the early counterparty days, which are some of the primitives to what we now call NFTs. Wasn't called NFTs back then. It was called crypto art. Did you experiment on any of those on that chain, or did it give you any sort of inspiration to then create the Meta Punk controller, which is part of the PridePunks?
Yeah. So in 2013, I reached out to a guy named Manu, who's used to be one of the co-founders of Open Zeppelin, because he had built this tool called Proof of Existence, I think it's called. And I had reached out. I was just like, oh, I want to take photography and just like timestamp it all of it, and have like these, you know, it weren't called NFTs yet, but just like timestamping, you know, we used terms that were still Web2 native, like notarize, right? I'm going to notarize all these JPEGs, right? And at the time it like didn't work. It was too early. Although years later, when I interviewed at Open Zeppelin, you know, Manu tells me the story that like, you know, he went his Gmail to look me up, and he's just like, oh, you know, interview application. Then he saw like, you know, this is like 2017 or 18. Then he saw like, and 2013. And he's like, oh my God, you're that like guy. Color coins. I didn't do too much with color coins. Color coins were very difficult to use. So was Counterparty. I was a little bit more active in the Mastercoin community, if you remember the Mastercoin community. That, I mean, this is like old drama, right? I can just talk shit right now, because like it's not that everyone's dead, but it feels like it, right? It feels that long ago, right? Like on the last empire, but like, you know, the Mastercoin before Counterparty, you know, originally it was Mastercoin, right? And Tether was originally on Mastercoin, and it was like, oh, we're going to do all these amazing things. And then the community on Mastercoin was just like stubborn. And then there's these like great developers who are like, well, screw it, we're going to leave and we're going to do Counterparty. Then they worked on Counterparty. And then, you know, like everything just sort of like, you know, like forking was this idea of like, oh, you know, if you don't agree, you just fork. And like people forked a lot. But you know, like it was maybe like there wasn't that many people in the ecosystem, right? You couldn't just fork and like refill your ranks with talent. You know, there were very few people who understood, you know, like Bitcoin's UTXO model. There's very few people who understood how you could like build smart contracts on top of that, you know. And then at the same time, Vitalik had sort of like popped up, and he was starting to talk about Ethereum, you know, and you know, there was this, you know, tribalism around, you know, like coins, which is silly because I don't know if you remember, what was it called? Solid coin. Solid coin's like the first altcoin off of Bitcoin. It was made by this guy named Real Solid. Go figure. But yeah, so just early, super early days. I'm sure I did stuff, but there aren't great explorers for that. Like there isn't great infrastructure to like go find out, right?
Yeah, I know.
Yeah,
first,
wondering if there's some like treasure of mine that I don't remember.
There probably is. Some of the I just call them the NFT explorers or the historians have. First, Namecoin is the first fork of Bitcoin. So there's a lot of antiquities that are there that have been selling high prices. Emmercoin has started to pull up some stuff. Also, I've heard people exploring like Datacoin, and there's probably some other ones. Whether there's actual significance or not is to be determined. But just even the rush of finding it is very fulfilling.
Yeah, Namecoin was not the first fork of Bitcoin.
It wasn't.
No, it was
really.
There were other forks earlier on. I was really big on, although the one I was working on, TerraCoin, was later than Namecoin, but I think Solid Coin was the actual real first fork.
Really, that'd be new information. That'd be new information for me.
Yeah. It was run by this guy named Real Solid, and this is like ultra ancient history. This is like early Bitcoin days.
Yeah, I believe Namecoin was forked in April of 2011. So it's something earlier there. Also back then was like, there's probably something on bitcointalk.org from the forums if it did exist. So archaeologists go excavate. Yeah. Go excavate it. So
I'm on there.
Are you?
Oh yeah. Crazy Rabbit is my Crazy Rabbit LTC. I was really into Litecoin for a while. But you can pull me up. I'm still legendary. I just mentioned that because I was really proud of that.
That you should be. That's a lot of history, and we're still exploring it. So diving into your project, PridePunks, right? Yeah. PridePunks, you've done a lot of work on this website, which is freaking incredible, I have to say. There's a lot.
Thank you.
There's a lot going into this. It's a 2018 project, the first punk derivative, right? Created June 23rd, 2018. It was announced in the Discord, which I have pulled up right here, the original post.
Perfect.
Yeah.
I love that post's still there.
We need these types of timestamps and provenance in crypto because at the end of the day, it always comes down to code. Even we could debate semantics and idealism, but if it's there in writing, then for us, that's proof because not many people were around back then to notarize it and to say that it was true. Yeah. Tell us a little bit about the inspiration of it and how long did you work on it? At least the idea or the technicals before posting this.
Yeah. So I was really into NFTs, the early sort of version back then. I don't remember exactly how long I worked on it. I was a very novice, like Solidity smart contract developer. So there's just like a lot of things I just didn't get back then. So when I created this, I was really into punks. I had a lot of punks, which I all sold very, very too early. Like way.
Were you original claimer?
I was not an original claimer. So that's unfortunate. I would have loved to have been an original claimer, but I was not. So basically I created this like at the time, right? Like, there used to be this spot called Bushwick Generator here in New York, and basically kind of this unfinished real estate in Bushwick. And the developers had given these guys they said, hey, you can use it while we're trying to figure out what to do with it, and we'll do this crypto collective there. And they would do these crypto art meetups, and like Matt and the LarvaLabs team, they would like come and like people would sit around and talk about like digital art and like what it was going to do and what it meant and blah, 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 blah. And I was really excited about it, but we went kind of through this period where like nothing felt like it was happening, right? You know how like there's like that idea of like a punctuated equilibrium where like nothing happens and everything happens all at once really fast, and then nothing happens again for a long time. So it was like kind of in that period, and I had a bunch of CryptoPunks and I wanted to make them more exciting and I wanted to play with them more. And I noticed that they didn't have a background. They were like a transparent PNG. So the thought I had was like, oh, wow, like we could add backgrounds to these. And I actually had a lot of wacky ideas. Like you could bundle a bunch of them together to get like a totally different token to come out, right? Because like CryptoPunks is very important for people to know are not NFTs. They were an early like sort of like hybrid ERC20 format. So, the idea was, okay, I'll play around with it, right? Like with CryptoPunks, they don't even have metadata on chain. They just have a hash of the original image. So that the idea being that, anyone can always supply the image and then you can prove that it's the correct one. The really wild thing about there is though, for example, there's no on-chain reference to the ordering, right? So that this image that you're showing here, right? Like that's all the punks and they have the hash of this image on chain and it just goes 1, 2, 3. But like, there's no reason to say that like 1 to 10 goes left or right or up and down, right? Like, so there's no like on-chain specifications around that. So I started playing with it. I basically was thinking at the time, there was a lot of like talk around like early social impact stuff. Like today, social impact is like a hot topic again, and people are talking about doing good and stuff like that. But we've always talked about that at like every sort of phase, every like cohort of crypto. That's been a big topic. And at the time, I'd worked on another project for this hackathon for like the AirSwap had a hackathon called like Shitlist, which was like a place to like basically call out like people who'd done like shitty stuff, right? It was meant to be like this like tool for like abusers or people who'd suffered at the hands of other people. It's a pretty naive idea or implementation of like trying to implement social good. But one of the things that has been historically an issue in the Web3 community is a lack of diversity, representation of other points of view, lack of, basically diversity around like LGBTQ individuals, people of color, women, the whole gauntlet, right? And 2018, we had a run up, right? Like it felt like really big, like things were getting really big. And we had this sort of like same dynamics that you see a little bit today, where a lot of people come in for like money, and the sort of like demographic, skews even more to one direction. And while we had a lot of sort of like virtual signaling from the Ethereum community, right? Like back then, you'd go to Ethereum meetup and like, PhD scholars would show up in onesies, like rainbow cat onesies, right? And with like, makeup and like be fabulous and like talk about Ethereum. But it didn't feel to me like we were making a clear enough like sort of statement about inclusivity. So when I created PridePunks, the idea was like, okay, here's this project that everybody likes. I mean, everybody really, really likes it now. But back then it was like, okay, it was like the only like kind of art project that people want. Sorry, it wasn't the only art project, but it was like kind of the art project that like people kind of knew to some sort of like degree, right? They had their own website because there weren't like, I don't know if OpenSea was up yet. I forget when OpenSea.
OpenSea was, I believe, like early 2018.
Early 2018. Yeah, they were in the office next to us in 2018. I should have joined them in 2018. But yeah, basically it was just like, okay, how can I make a statement here? Like we have these backgrounds. What can we do? Let's make a statement. I thought, okay, well, the symbol that I could think of really that really encompasses sort of like my vision on how, like Web3 needs to be more inclusive was the rainbow, right? Like Pride Rainbow represents a ton of things, primarily the LGBTQ plus community. I didn't really think of this as an LGBTQ plus project. I thought of it more as like a political statement, right? I really loved the idea of like, communities of people just trading punks with rainbows, right? Like, hey guys, like it's more than just what you think, right? And that was like what really drove me at the time. So I added that. I shared that in the Discord, but at the time I wasn't a great Solidity programmer. So there was like the original CryptoPunk contract is of course not standard. Like it's just something they wrote. It's quite difficult to actually use and interact with. So I kind of got stymied on how to properly write the modern form of the Metapunk controller. Really the idea for how to properly do it is partially inspired by what the V1 Punk wrapper is doing. So, it was like I'd done that, but I realized that, I didn't really have the chops to finish it in a decentralized way the way I wanted to. I got busy with something else, job, something like that. And I just forgot about it. Right. So it's kind of funny, but I minted two tokens, these two, right? 6485 and 2851. And actually the real CryptoPunks stayed in the contract for a couple years before I withdrew them. I still have 2851. And yeah, now I'm sort of like back, a way better Solidity programmer. Although, huge disclaimer to everybody watching this, I'm not an expert Solidity programmer. I have not audited these contracts. I make no guarantees, right? But it seems to work, right? And now it works in a sort of like safe way. You don't have to wrap a punk inside of it anymore like you used to. It should be safe. I know no promises, obviously, but it should be well thought through this time around, basically.
Right. And you covered a lot of that in great detail on the PridePunks website. I'm just going back a little bit, though, to the original post in the Discord, the Punks Discord. You could see Matt from LarvaLabs actually responded, said, "This is super cool. Please post a write-up when it's ready." Right above is a post from PunkBot where there was an offer for 0.3 ETH for a CryptoPunk to just show you for $100, $142, just to show you how early it was. Did Matt or LarvaLabs ever follow up on getting more information, or was it just more of like a face value, we support you?
It was more of a face value to support me. I had seen them at an event. I think it was Blockstack hosted something. It might have been a Bushwick generator. I forget. I talked to them in person about it a little bit. I don't know if they would remember it. So, if you go ask them, maybe they'll be like, never heard of the guy. Talked to them briefly about it. I think the general mood was like, it was cool, right? Like this, I don't think Matt and the rest of the LarvaLabs team, I don't think they thought punks would be what they became. Like they definitely thought it was going to be big. They thought it was going to be cool, but the prices of punks is beyond traditional art, right? Like it was, they were creative technologists and they did really cool creative technology projects. And they were like hackers, artist hackers, right? Which is something that I really admired about them. I've always really admired that they were just artist hackers, which, I had been trying for years with the previous company to like be. I was sort of like just sucked into being just like implementing some, your boss, whoever hired you's sort of like vision. So it was just, I've always just been really impressed. So yeah, beyond that, they didn't really follow up, but to be fair, I did say I was going to do a write-up, and then it took me like 4 years to do that write-up. So I guess the ball is kind of in my court.
It's very true. Yeah, I mean, even when you saw the Bored Ape acquisition of the CryptoPunk IP, Matt and I forget what the other guy's name is. In the post, they basically said that CryptoPunks outlived them, and they're just pretty much technologists and very terrible brand and marketing individuals, and that's why they handed over the IP, regardless if you believe in the decision or not. So I do have open the original 2018 contract, goes back to 367 days. It looks like 1,367 days, June 23rd. It looks like there's 3 inputs here. You did mention that two of them were your CryptoPunks. Are you aware of what the other one is?
The other one would have been my. Can you click the transaction? No, the transaction. If you look at the from channel, they're all from the same address. So it would have been all me. So I assume it was me just testing. I don't think I ever called the make token function a third time. And
just for clarification, nobody else experimented with the contract outside of yourself?
No, not until recent modern history. Right. So it's back 1,367 days, and then it's 500 days when I think I withdrew the original NFTs. The original, they're not NFTs. Sorry, the original CryptoPunks.
Right.
But yeah, until a couple weeks ago.
Yep. And some of the modifications, I think it's on the website that there was a few people who caught wind of what was happening and began minting from the contract. So you had to pause it. Yeah.
So I created a new MetaPunk controller, like a, a new version of it. And I tend to like hack in public. So I just put it on my Twitter. It's sort of like part of my brand. I'm always like building wild and crazy stuff. So it's like, oh yeah, I figured out how to mint it again. And this one guy who's a colleague at an old company that we used to work at, he went and made an interface for it really quickly. He was just like, oh, I just minted some. Here's like an interface to mint with. And then so people started minting it. And I was like, oh, no. So I went in and paused it. And actually, it's kind of like a shame that like people, not a shame, but there's like still stuff that I would like to play around with. But like once people start watching you, you can't play around in public, right? Like already, you wouldn't believe how many scam NFTs I've been sent since I re-announced this. Yeah. It's just like people are just like watching you and you're like, oh, look at all these new NFTs I have. Oh, isn't it funny? You just can't verify the contract data on Etherscan. I wonder why that is. Right. And you're just like, ugh.
Yeah. When you get all the scammers minting to your own contract to believe that you're minting the official Bored Ape, mutant ape, monkey thing, whatever the derivative is. It's pretty wild. So on the metadata provenance, metadance, that's the new derivative. It mentions IPFS. This is also a big debate within the historical community. Where is the image stored? We know IPF wasn't created until 2015, really didn't become functional even until later, around 2018, 19. In this tweet or this post, it says that the old IPF data no longer resolves, but then you had it saved and stored somewhere else, I think on AWS, so that you could prove it. Can you just explain a little bit about that?
Yeah. So I used to use everything that was new. Like if it was new and cutting edge, I built my thing on it, no matter how hard it was. And IPFS was medium hard in 2018. Not super hard, but like medium hard. The catch is that unlike today, where we have like NFT storage and Pinata and
there's like Arweave, right?
Well, Arweave is amazing. I did one other project solo with Arweave specifically because of my experience here. But the thing is that IPFS, it's like free, but it's not really free. If you don't pin it, i.e. pay someone to store it, people drop it from the network. And if it's not popular, it gets dropped really fast because people aren't replicating it. So originally I put it into IPFS, and sure enough, after I don't know how long, they stopped resolving. That's what the sort of like tweet is. You like, if you scroll back up just a little bit, I put this out in like March in 2021, where it was like I said, fun fact, I minted NFTs a few years back for Hyper MetaPunks. I stored them in IPFS. I still have them because I also stored them in Amazon S3. And that was pretty important because back then I realized that IPFS wasn't super stable. And I wasn't going to be running a server for, JPEGs for like 4 years, right? So I backed them up because I had specifically this concern where with IPFS, you didn't have a guarantee. And the other thing is IPFS back then was really slow, like unusably slow. If you didn't run an IPS node with all your data locally, with whatever service was going to use it, it was just like impossible. And I'm sure IPFS people out there are like going to be angry at me, but it's true. I put it in Amazon S3, and fortunately, which I think we're going to get to about the metadata, I can prove that, which is great.
Yeah, absolutely. And now it's into the 2022 when you fixed it up for the wrapper contract and then the MetaPunk underlying contract. Now you can store it, but then also I saw a question, which I believe you have it stated in here, is the minting with the updated imagery on the original 2018 contract? Is there an accompanying contract that mints? Because that is also a very important perspective for some of the collectors.
Yeah. So all tokens are minted on the original 2018 contract, all of them. The way the MPC controller, originally the way the MetaPunk contract worked was it basically sat on top of CryptoPunks. So the idea was, it didn't work very well, but you deposit you would basically send MetaPunk control a CryptoPunk, and then you would tell the MetaPunk controller, hey, well, in this case, the MetaPunk contract, sorry, you would tell it, hey, I deposited this token. Now you're the owner. It would check if it was the owner, and then it would mint you a new ERC 721, which is like a new standard at the time. Of course, nobody in the right mind is going to deposit a CryptoPunk into anything now, except for like their like lawyers' long-term archival storage. So the way it works now is the MetaPunk controller impersonates the CryptoPunk contract and is the owner of the MetaPunk contract. That means all those functionality that exists on the MetaPunk controller now, a MetaPunk contract belongs to the MetaPunk controller. And so basically the MetaPunk controller, when you go to mint, it says, hey, I deposited a CryptoPunk, tricks it. It goes, okay, here, I've minted you a token. Okay, then it takes it and it sends that to the person who's actually calling the contract doing the minting. So yeah, all minting happens on the original 2018 contract, which is obviously very important. Like otherwise it would just be a new contract.
Mm-hmm. And then this brings up another important aspect about the keys to the contract. We did see a slight debacle with an earlier 2016 ETH contract called Etherization, something like that, where it didn't come out until after they reminted on the original contract. Same thing, but they had to create a contract on top of it that the owner still possessed the keys because of how old the contract was. There was like certain commands that were integrated into that people didn't realize. Do you have a plan for the keys if you do control them? And then how do you how do you appease the community?
Yeah, absolutely. So the MetaPunk controller, I am the owner of the MetaPunk controller. The MetaPunk controller cannot rug the MetaPunk contract, right? All it does is impersonate the mint process. So at worst, I could mint myself more tokens, right? Which actually I have a function on the MetaPunk controller to mint myself tokens, right? With my project, I want to be able to mint some tokens. The plan for the ownership of that contract is to give it to a DAO, right? So the idea is I build DAOs, like that's kind of what I do as my day-to-day thing. And the idea is like, we want to have a PridePunk DAO that takes ownership of it. Now, the other alternative is to simply burn the keys. But I don't think that's super wise. Certainly if the DAO votes to like burn them and send them to zero, that I couldn't do anything about it. So as soon as the mint is done, users who are on the whitelist or who have minted a token are going to be able to claim a PridePunk DAO non-transferable NFT vote token. So they will be holders in the PridePunk DAO, and then they will be able to decide whatever they want to do. But certainly by the end of the mint, we'll be transferring the ownership of the MetaPunk controller contract to the DAO.
And once the ownership is transferred to the DAO, what can the DAO specifically do with the ownership over the contract?
So the idea is to leave the DAO a certain allocation of tokens, right? The idea is that they could use a treasury of tokens to fund itself, right? Like maybe they want to do some sort of operation. They sell a MetaPunk, PridePunk, and they use that money to do whatever they want. Now, the thing is, like some older projects, like for example, I think CryptoSkulls, like the owner minted himself like 1,000 skulls, right? Which is totally fine. But gas fees are a little bit different like in 2019 than they are today. So to do something like mint the contract out, right, and say, okay, we're going to give 1,000 to the DAO would require like $30,000 in gas to do, which doesn't really make sense, right? So the idea is, and maybe post mint, it would make more sense to just mint them out and burn the keys. But the idea is that if you leave the DAO the ability to do a vote and mint, then it belongs to the community to sort of choose what they can do, right? Now, that said, the DAO still can't rug token holders, right? And it can't mint more than 10,000, right? So some people say, could you mint more than 10,000? No, you can't mint more than 10,000. That's limited by the MetaPunk controller itself. So once it's transferred to the DAO, the extent of the functionality that remains is minting out the rest of the tokens. And that's pretty much it. I mean, maybe one thing that the DAO should do is transfer the ownership of the MetaPunk contract itself to the zero address, right? Burn that key and then maintain the holder. Although I actually think that kills the MetaPunk controller as well. I mean, if they want to do that, it's up to them.
Right. Yeah. At least if we look at some of the recent historical NFT burns of keys, Mooncats had one. The community 75% to 25% ended up burning keys of the Genesis ones. The Ethereization also decided to burn the keys. Both of those were manually trusted processes, so we're still trusting the dev team to burn it. They could have copied it. We don't really know. So this kind of takes it the next step through token provenance to help suffice any of those concerns.
Yeah, so the owner is something that you can clearly see on the contract. So if it's sent to the 0x address or it's sent to the DAO, and to be clear here also, a lot of times people talk about DAOs and really it's a Gnosis safe. Right now, there's a treasury, which is a Gnosis safe today, and there's a process by which you give the Gnosis safe control to the DAO's time lock controller, which is very doable and which will be done. But the key to MetaPunk controller will be directly owned by the Open Zeppelin governor contract, which means that it can only be used if it goes through a full vote process, right? So there isn't any, there isn't any like sideways around it, right? It's the same contract that's used by ENS, by Gitcoin, by Uniswap, right? So if the community was malicious, at most, they could mint the rest of the allocation for like the DAO and then sell them, which is kind of like the intended use case of it anyway.
Right. Yeah. It says here that 1,000 is reserved for team founder, early contributors, and DAO. I will talk about in a second, but you did mention CryptoSkulls and whether this pisses off some people or not, it could destroy narratives. There is an ongoing narrative that these 10K PFP projects are considered historical because they're kind of writing CryptoPunks, and then Bored Apes kind of did the same. So these like sandwiched ones in between have been kind of writing a little bit of coattails, and whether some people believe it or not is up to them. But obviously punks are a 10K. This is the first punks derivative. This was created about a year before CryptoSkulls. And the difference here is that you mentioned the creator of CryptoSkulls actually minted all of the CryptoSkulls tokens and then listed them on OpenSea, where here you minted 2 as a test, and then it remained unused for a while. But you could say theoretically that CryptoSkulls wouldn't have sold out because there was people buying it for 0.05 until that recent pump, whenever that was, like a few months ago. So there's kind of that debate. It's technically they're all minted out, but they're minted out by the owner. Here is similar for you. You minted 2 originally. That gives it the provenance of the 10K supply, where we mint out the rest. What do you consider this? The 10K supply, do you think that the first punk derivatives a little bit of a more ironclad approach to the historical significance of the project?
I think the best part of this project is what you said. It's the first CryptoPunk derivative, right? At that point, no one had thought to do more PFP projects, right? Like PFP projects weren't a thing. You didn't use them as like icons on your Twitter. That's the thing that's really special here, right? We didn't mint 10K in 2018. I didn't recognize the significance of it in 2018. It wasn't like I was just like, oh man, I see the future. This is happening, right? But it also is kind of like the first political statement in the crypto NFT space, which is, maybe I can't say first, right? Maybe there are other things, but this is the first time that someone had looked at some other art that people had built on chain and was like, oh, you know what? I want to take that. I want to make a derivative of it, make a new thing from it. I think that's very special. Maybe some folks want to see the whole 10K supply minted out back then. If that were true, I'm sure I would be on a yacht already by now somewhere. Although knowing my paper hands, probably not. So I think that's important. Someone else mentioned to me that it's kind of the second PFP project even if there's only 2 of them minted, right? And that's also pretty special. Certainly now that like PFPs are like an entire thing, maybe it's a little less special that I didn't know at the time that was going to be like a huge deal, right? But it's the second PFP project. But really, I would lean into the first CryptoPunk derivative, right? The 10K, someone mentioned to me, and I'd gotten excited about that idea. I think that the fact that like you didn't get 10K people to go and get them in 2018 is really important. Like that's a relevant factor there. So I'm not really claiming that at this point.
Mm-hmm. And the idea behind PFPs, to me, it's still subjective because there's a lot of projects that you could claim to be PFPs. I put Mooncats as PFPs. There's like crypto bots and crypto fighters and all these that came before. And also, I can guarantee you LarvaLabs didn't create this with the intention of them being PFPs. I've even heard many interviews where that wasn't the original intention until a lot of the community members just started doing it. So there's a lot of claims, then a lot of rebuttals, and then a lot of debate, and then it leads to tribalism kind of after that.
Yeah. I think the important thing is when I made this, it was just a different world, right? Like, people today, PFPs and blue chips and, people selling these things for millions of dollars, like none of this existed in 2018. Right? Like you were just having fun. You were putting smart contracts on the world computer, right? Like maybe you got like a cat, right? Like CryptoKitties was like, when did CryptoKitties come out? In 2018?
17, later? I believe. 17. October, November of 2017, around there.
Yeah. So I think you could probably pretty fairly call those PFP projects in the modern sense of the world. Although I've never seen anyone use it as their avatar. Although maybe I should do. I still have some old ones. Yeah,
and then when you go even farther back on Namecoin, there's Twitter eggs, which are actually the original PFP on Twitter. Although again, not an intentional project, but still, those PFPs minted through I believe it was called One Name at the time. So then it goes back into culture and layer 0 on these change and the whole debate.
Yeah, it's kind of wild. Like, when NFT Archaeologists started reaching out to me about this, I was just like, wait, NFT whatiologist? Like, what? And then, I started talking with like Adam McBride and, listening to his podcast stuff that he puts out and going through the Twitters. And if someone had told me in 2018 that people would make a brand, like they would be NFT archaeologists, like, I used to be in the art world, right? And those people have, big books of provenance that they keep in vaults deep underground, filled with like, inert noble gases. And they like, very in secret, like look at the back of a painting and like take a picture, like the idea of like their, crypto having not only like disrupted the art market, but also disrupted like the provenance market, right? Like that was such a closed world. And suddenly you have people who are like just digging through smart contracts. Like one of the things that there's this guy, Non-Fungible Mate, who sort of like originally sort of like got me down this rabbit hole because he was like, oh, I have a piece of the original like Next blockchain NFT. I was like, oh my God, I remember Next. I was like, oh my God, that's right. And the picture is like a painting of Next of the logo. So it's sort of like funny, Yeah,
it's like an oil painting, I believe, or something.
Yeah. It's like an oil painting of like a logo of a project that isn't really around anymore. Although I assume somewhere out there, the Next blockchain is actually running. No blockchains ever really die. But yeah, it's really wild. And then of course, like to see people debating it, it's just like, you imagine there's a show on Netflix around art historians, and they like go to like discuss if a painting is really authentic, if it's really real. And they like go to like different galleries and different, like, they go to like the Louvre and they go behind the scenes and they have all the special equipment. And then you go into like a Discord and people are just like, no, you have to look into the, the bits and the contract. And people are like, you're just like, for me, it's been kind of like a wild crash course on like how deep Web3 NFT culture has actually permeated the real world.
It's a whirlwind ever since I got into NFTs through the Mooncat rediscovery last March, which at the time was considered the second oldest NFT. And I owned an antique store in real life, so that completely made sense to me. Now Mooncats are probably like the 100th oldest NFT, and the amount of time and due diligence the community puts into debating the semantics and what's right and what's not. I don't know if everything will be completely 100% certified, because now you have financial incentives tied to provenance, which completely kind of changes the model. But the historical community works pretty closely together to kind of get to the bottom of it, and then maybe you have one or two slight differences that will shift. I want to go a little bit now into the modern integrations and combinations of what you're doing with this project.
Sure.
First, we're minting out basically the rest of the 10,000.
Yeah.
Are they all the original CryptoPunks, including the apes and the aliens and the monkeys and the zombies, just with a rainbow in the background?
Yes. So that's the other big thing here when we talk about like metadata, right? And this is like another interesting thing. So this is all the original ones, the same indexing that is like known to be the proper indexing, even though indexing of CryptoPunks is not actually on chain anywhere. So yeah, it's all the original ones with rainbows. The rainbows are in different like orientations, but at the time I didn't consider that significant. So it wasn't like, these traits like upside down rainbow is going to be rarer. Actually, another funny thing is on chain, CryptoPunks don't have metadata, right? Like these things, like for example, the CryptoPunk you're hovering right now, glasses, like chops, earring, right? Like that was all data that came from like the LarvaLabs API. None of that is on chain, right? Like, today that's like, super verboten, right? Like, oh yeah, where's the metadata? It's not on chain. It's like, well, CryptoPunks is like before that, right? And, that's sort of like what you talk about when you come to sort of like social consensus, right? Like the fact that eyeglasses is a trait is sort of like based on the years and years of people saying eyeglasses is a trait, and that like metadata becoming, replicated at OpenSea, replicated on other platforms as being like canonical. But again, it's doesn't exist on chain.
Yeah. I actually wasn't aware of that until a few of the Mooncat devs did like a report on the off-chain generation of CryptoPunks and all the differences behind it. So regarding this rainbow list mint, is the random generation on chain, or did you have to kind of follow the provenance and do it off chain with like a random number generator or something?
No. So all of these images were created in 2018, and they're all the same. I haven't played with that. The only thing that I've done is I've added that off-chain metadata around like glasses and eyes and nose or pipe, so that it shows up on OpenSea, right? And actually it's taken directly from OpenSea. And that's because otherwise people sort of freak out and saying like, oh, there's no metadata, it's just an image. Although at the time when I created it, CryptoPunks were just an image, right? So it seemed fine then. Otherwise, like when people mint, it's actually mint sequentially, right? So it's just like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So if you noticed in the docs, there are reserved tokens, and the reserved ones are the aliens and the apes. And the reason why they're reserved is I would like a couple for myself. I think that those would also make great sort of like bootstrapping a treasury for the DAO. But the more important reason is that sequential mining is vulnerable to MEV attacks on Ethereum, right? Like you could simply, like you could see an aliens coming up next, and you could simply use Flashbots to pay a miner to order the transaction so that you got it, right? Now, 2 weeks ago, I didn't really think that that would be an issue, right? Like I was just going to like drop this on people and be like, hey, have at it. Like, let's have fun. Today, if you look, like the Discord's like 1.8 thousand. Today, I'm actually not very certain of that, right? Like there are professional folks out there who may be like trying to like professionally like game the mint because it is an incremental mint. I think most people not. Most people are, sort of like honestly participating. Yeah, there is no random number generation. That would actually make it extremely expensive. I thought about that originally, but basically the problem is that once you got to kind of like the end, the last few tokens remaining, it would be very difficult to calculate in an affordable way which one is available, right? So if you can kind of imagine when you go sequentially, you do like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, right? So let's just take, 1 through 10, like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So you can have like 5 reserved, you can go 1, 2, 3, 4, skip 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. But if you start doing like 2, 4, 6, 8 are reserved, then it's like 1, check if the next one's available, not available, increment. The next one, check if the next one, not available, right? So it raises the cost. And then what happens is if someone mints like 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, right? And you're at 1, then you're actually doing 1. Now you have to scan the availability from 2 to 9 before you find 10. Right. And in an array of 10, okay, maybe that's doable. But if once you get up to 10,000, right, like you come to a point where basically it's like it becomes infinitely expensive, like in real dollars, to do that on the smart contract. There is the possibility that you could mint by selecting the numbers directly, and then people just do like a mad rush for the ones that they really wanted. But my experience with those have been that they actually burn a lot of users, right? Like users spend a lot of gas. Like, for example, when you claim loot, you just pick the number that you wanted and you claimed. It certainly goes a long way to creating a mad rush and people just like freaking out and like just doing whatever is possible. But it also leads to a lot of people just losing money on failed transactions, right? Because it's not possible to know that they've all been minted out unless you're running an off-chain indexer, which is tracking all of the mint events, right? So if you're not doing that, you don't know. And what you end up having is like regular people can lose just really extraordinary sums of money, especially when sometimes, MetaMask says, hey, this transaction is going to cost an insane amount of money here. Are you sure? What MetaMask is actually trying to tell you is, no, don't do this. It won't work, right? But, for some reason, they give you the option to spend $20,000 for something that's not going to work, right? So that was kind of like the thinking behind that, right? Like, it's going to be great to finally make some money off these things that I did in 2018, but I do not want people to get like hurt from just trying to create this stampede effect, right? So
do you think though that it'll hurt the potential secondary market activity because the rare ones are taken off the market and allocated in a specific way?
I think if it also included the zombies, maybe, right? But there's a big difference between the apes, aliens, and zombies, right? Like that's like 8, 15, I think, and then like 88. Like zombies have like 88. So I think no, right? Like because the thing is that like although I don't believe in like trusting strangers, and I am to you and your audience a stranger, so you should not trust me by default. In the grand scheme of things, who is more trustworthy, me or someone who's using flash bots to bribe miners to acquire the really valuable ones, right? Like those people clearly have, an unknown, strictly financial motivation, which may or may not align with the interests of the project short-term or long-term, right? You can at least assume or make some sort of presumption that by giving like a portion to the DAO and a portion to myself, that I have some sort of vested interest in the success of the project. Now, had I done like, all the zombies as well, yeah, I love that one actually.
Yeah.
Like, I just want to point out, like, I don't know if you can like even find that one again. Something that blew my mind is I am in a crypto Discord with positive imagery, right? Like, this did not exist in other crypto Discords, right? Like you cannot post this stuff in other crypto Discords, right? Like, so to be able to have created a place that feels like that's very special, but that's a little off track. But to your point, I think no, it's a small number of them. The rest of them that, like the rest of that like 1,000 that are reserved those have to be paid for in mint dollars, right? So unlike other projects, they are not free to people, right? Like if you say, okay, well, there's 1,000 reserved to the team, it's like, yeah, but that team is going to have to pay dearly to get a hold of them. So they're actually not free, right? Like there's like a floor value to them. So long story short, I think, no, it's not going to hurt the secondary market. I certainly think that if I've waited this long, that, now that we know punks are a thing and like this is the first punk derivative, it'd be very different if it was like 2019. Be like, oh, whatever, people are going to pay me $5 for it. Great. It's just a JPEG. But today you can say, oh, well, 10 years from now, 2028, 20 years from now, 2038, right? These things are still going to be a thing. So yeah.
Yeah. And there's thousands and thousands of derivatives. So going into the whitelist minting and then the public sale, I believe we're recording this on a Monday. It's going to be the whitelist, or the rainbow list will be open within the next few days.
It's probably there. I think we're going to open it tomorrow. For the last time, we opened it on Saturday. And then I think we're going to do a short opening tomorrow, which is Tuesday. I'm not sure when people are going to be watching this. So if you're watching
Wednesday,
so maybe that moment has passed. And then the goal is probably to mint Thursday, but maybe late Wednesday. It's kind of up in the air, and hopefully, nothing enormous changes.
How did you come to the decision of, I believe it was 4,000 for the rainbow list and 5,000 for the public mint, something like that? What was the thought behind that, and not just going a complete rainbow list or just a complete public mint?
Honestly, I just asked a bunch of people and sort of averaged their numbers, right? In the beginning, I didn't really want to do a rainbow list at all. It just sort of makes life a little bit more complicated for me. Like this has kind of turned into a bigger project than I had anticipated. Like NFT historians were like, yeah, you should mint them out. I'm like, yeah, have at it. They're like, oh, but you need a website. I'm like, oh, okay, here's a website. Oh, but you need a whitelist. Oh, okay, you'll have to build the functionality for that. So it's been like kind of like gradually more complicated. For the numbers, it was just like averaging what sort of like people were suggesting. I've done actually successful NFT projects in the past. I did Solos, which was like kind of the first, not generative art, but it's like generative collage art with real like paint stuff. And then I also did Dope Wars, which is this now a really thriving DAO community, which, if you're going to judge people based on their background and reputation, I have been a good steward and honest in that community, and they've been doing some really awesome stuff. So yeah, the numbers were kind of like out of a hat. I don't know if there's a benefit to like doing everyone a rainbow list or everyone not. Something that I've been like trying to avoid, although I feel like I'm slowly sliding into just like the hype ball, right? Where it's just like, I keep telling like, folks who are helping out, like, this is not Invisible Friends. This is not Mecca. This is not, Pixelmon. Right? Like, this is not that, right? Like, yeah, people should mint, people should pay money on it. I definitely want to like take the dynamism and the enthusiasm of the project and turn it into a DAO, right? Like DAOs are like where I really care about and like where I want to take us to the project to go. But I'm not trying to run some like high-end polished NFT project thing. So I haven't done like, super close analysis of like, what are the benefits of like whitelisting it, rainbow listing? Whitelist is actually an anti-signal to like the vision on virtues and values of PridePunks. But I haven't really like done an enormous thought process to that.
Well, a 0.04 mint is completely fair. It's the original minting I know back then was like 0.08. Now a lot of the newer projects have escalated it to 1 ETH, 2 ETH, 3 ETH is absolutely insane. So you're keeping the ethos of the original contract intact.
Yeah. Like my spirit is like, I would like to make some money of this, right? And there are a lot of people helping out for whom they should be rewarded for their work. But yeah, I cannot imagine charging ETH. Right. Like originally I was thinking like for the public 0.09 and maybe that'll still be the public. But like, when I saw projects like charging people like 3. What was Pixelmon?
Pixelmon was 3 ETH. Yeah.
You know,
it's gotten out of control, cash grabby. And this was not the point of it. Yeah.
Yeah. Like that's just not nice.
So now looking past mint, what is your vision for PridePunks, or at least what do you expect to happen? And then what is your role after mint?
So what do I expect to happen? Well, hopefully it mints out. It is a large number, even though like some are going to be reserved and not minted initially, and then maybe the DAO will or will not eventually mint them. And we're not at the NFT top. So I think actually looking at the enthusiasm now, I think it probably is going to mint out. Like people are really excited about it. Like the idea of the first derivative, the fact that it's like a very clear political statement on inclusivity in Web3 attracts a lot of people, right? Like it's, one of the things people in the community were talking about is after this, they should go make Pride Bored Apes.
Oh my God, it's gonna be the first derivative with many derivatives afterwards.
Right. Like, but you can start to see a world where people clearly, because I don't know if you're in America, but I live in America. Yep. And like we've been in America the past, years. And we know that like we've gotten to become a very polarized society, and symbols of inclusivity have become polarizing in and of their own right. So it's really exciting to be able to like continue to push that sort of like, it's a little bit of a statement, right? There are stereotypes over who Web3 predominantly is, right? So to be having a project that sort of like maybe pushes at that stereotype, I think is very important for me. Post mint, the idea is to move everything to the DAO, like both the control, but also then give people who hold PridePunk tokens or people who are on the whitelist the ability to mint a non-transferable vote token for the DAO. And this is important. And this is where we get to like my sort of like personal gain in all this, whereas like I want to experiment with new community structures, right? With Dope Wars, I really was experimenting with, can we build leaderless organizations that get things done? This real experiment is around, can we build organizations where membership does not become financialized? Right. So the idea of having it non-transferable is that like you can't sell it, and it's only one vote token per address. Now, the idea is every 3 months you could claim another vote token per address if you still have the NFT, right? But it doesn't matter if you have 100 or if you have 1, you can only get 1 vote token. This is important because if it were transferable or you could get more than 1 for your collection, people would actually build smart contract derivative platforms, right? Where basically you would put in your PridePunk and it would be like a Yearn Vault style system where it would be collectively claiming the vote tokens, and actually you would be receiving like this LP token, which would be liquid. So then you can now financialize that. I don't want that to happen because that introduces really negative pressures on your community, right? Also want the membership to be a continually expanding supply, right? Like there's, I know what Web3 looks like, right? Like day one of the DAO, I don't think the membership is going to completely embody the vision of like PridePunks, right? And, while PridePunks itself is not an explicit LGBTQ plus project, right? It is clearly Dennison's art statement. It would be nice if the DAO did have a real statement towards inclusivity for LGBTQ individuals in Web3, people of color, women, trans, non-binary, right? I really would like that because that doesn't exist in crypto. And, what I would like to find a way is to eventually have the makeup of the DAO be more reflective of that, because day one is not going to look like that, right? And so here's a little bit of a social experiment of like, can a group of people who aren't representative of like the sort of groups that essentially the organization is supposed to be like trying to champion, can they build a community that pushes in that direction. And that's going to be really complicated, right? Like, the DAO will get the keys the first day, but one of the things I would like to do is I would like to share a portion of the resale royalties with the DAO to fund them, right? But it's really tricky. Like, and I've learned this from other DAOs because, people show up and they want to like, the DAO to like LP some token, or they like come up with some like elaborate scam to like, sell the NFTs to like give back to the people, right? Like the short-sightedness of some participants because of the financialization of crypto leads communities to potentially suffer dearly in their like cohesion around some sort of like long-term goal, right? Because people think, oh, the DAO's got like, half the aliens. Well, we just sell the aliens, take the money, and we should just do like a Merkle drop and just all claim the money. So we'll all get like $50. It sounds great. Let's do it. Right. And that's, I would like that not to happen. Of course, I can't stop that from happening, right? Like this will be outside of my control. I will be a member like everyone else. So yeah, I think like, there's a lot to work to be done there. Also in terms of like building a sustainable community off Discord, right? Like, because Discord can be very like, one of the things we deal with in other DAOs that are supported on the platform at Tally is a burnout, right? From participation. So there's a lot of work to be done, but it's PridePunks was always kind of like this like wild, crazy statement on something that already kind of exists. I hope the PridePunk DAO can be that as well. When I started thinking about doing this relaunch, I'd put a tweet out on my Twitter saying like, hey, are there any crypto native LGBTQ plus organizations? No responses, right? And, sometimes I'll get like hundreds of responses to my tweets, like nothing, right? Which really made me think like, are you serious? Like in 2022, like this is like where we're at. One organization has reached out, but they're just, planning. They're going to try and launch something like in this summer, right? So maybe there will be early collaborators to help direct this in like a healthy direction. But it's funny, like, you create something years ago because you think, oh, change isn't coming fast enough. And then years later, like if you follow the sort of like Brantley ordeal and like ENS and like, some other, high profile, sort of like crypto influencers who have had mixed records, dating to the time period of PridePunks, you're like, well, we haven't come as far as like, there's still work to be done. Like I'm a positive person, still work to be done.
If you think about it, it seems like the NFT community and cryptos kind of moved in a similar chronological trajectory as just human rights movements in real life, where you have the white, and then it's like civil rights, and then the women's rights, and and then the LGBTQ rights, which is kind of like where we're getting into now. We're starting to see women projects start to gain a little bit of traction, right? And we had the multiracial kind of movement right beforehand. I remember when CryptoPunks started blowing up, there was a huge thing around getting as many races as possible into CryptoPunks because all the black punks were at the bottom, and it wasn't because people were against. It was just dominated by white men who were trying to get something to identify themselves. So this could hopefully start a cool movement behind that because it also has the provenance on top of it.
Sure. That's what I hope. And, a while ago, I tweeted out how like, I'm looking forward to a future where NFT fractionalization vaults aren't all filled with the brown me bits.
Yep.
Right. I'm a person of color. Like it does bother me. Right. Like, it's like I don't love that. Like, it's not cool. I don't like that at all. But, change is made progressively. And, like I still believe in, Vitalik's idea that I'm not the weirdest person in the room, like by far. And that really empowers me to say like, well, nobody else is going to do it. I'm going to do it. Right. And then
I support that. So I do have one final question before we get out of here, which talks about a trend within NFTs, which probably isn't going away anytime too soon, which is the CCO versus commercial rights versus personal use kind of debate.
Yeah.
Have you thought about that, or are you just going to leave it up to the DAO to determine where the rights are directed?
I hadn't thought about that. Leaving it up to DAO is a brilliant idea. So I think that probably answers the question. For a long time, I was on LarvaLabs side. I knew them in person. I met them before it was like famous. It felt very much like their artwork, right? They created it, so they owned it, right? Like that was pretty much how things always had happened. Like I was an artist, like I sold you a picture. You didn't actually own the right to go put that picture on a billboard, right? Like that was crazy. PridePunks itself was for me very much a derivative of that, right? Like because it's like, hey, I'll take your artwork and I'm going to make them gay, right? So it's like a very strong like political statement and, visually changing it, right? Like I was very hard on the left-sided punks, like funks, where I was just like, yeah, but you didn't really do anything. You just flipped it. And if you looked at the two things, you don't know which is original, right? Because you don't know which side they were facing in the first place, right? But I think the thing around the V1 punks actually started to change my opinion. It was like, yeah, I get it. It was created at a time when, you made your art and you like sold it, but people didn't get the rights to it. They just got the right to like hold it and look at it. But I think they inadvertently changed the world while they were doing it and made a new kind of reality. Like, I don't think that Matt and the LarvaLabs team was thinking people will identify themselves in the metaverse by this. It'll transcend being a piece of art, and it will be someone's embodiment of their existence in a new plane, right? Like, I don't think they thought of that. And it doesn't work that you can't be who you are in the metaverse, right? You don't like it doesn't work, right? It's like you own the right to your face, right? And if your face is in a digital format, like in your digital place, like you should also own the right to your face. Like that should be you. And I think that they didn't expect that, right? Nobody expected it. I didn't expect it. And when that happened, and especially when, like the V1 punks, I think are very, very particularly interesting. And, I think it's pretty cool. I wish I had gotten some. I'm like, oh shit, I missed out on the V1s. Like I only got some V2s. But their reaction to it was just like, yeah, guys, thank you. Like truly thank you. You've really, you accomplished what, 1 million % APR on yield farms couldn't do, which is you brought regular people to crypto, right? Like Jimmy Fallon's on with like Paris Hilton, and they're like talking about their Ethereum world computer secured digital art. So, thank you. But the world has changed. And I think that like Bored Apes, Yuga Labs is, I dismissed them in the beginning, which was, one of my other great mistakes.
As many of us.
But they weren't going to, I think Yuga Labs buying them was the perfect outcome, right? Because as an artist, in a way, you can't really ever let go of the work that you create. And they had been so strong on one side of it for so long, they couldn't have really fixed it, right? They couldn't have really fixed it. It was like time. It was like, thank you. But this is as far as the journey goes.
Yeah, it was the point of no return. They'd burned the community. Their relationship was crumbling with the community. And I don't think there was any other repair outside of selling the IP to Bored Apes, although it kind of loses its cypherpunk ideals a little bit. But I guess to take the next step for CryptoPunks, it seems like the right majority. Although the only concerning part I have is you have a consolidation at the top of a Web3 industry. I don't think that's ever been done. I try to think of times like where there was never really a true cryptocurrency mergers, maybe a few crypto exchanges, but we've never really seen this. So it's still to be determined if the Web3 mergers resemble Web2 mergers with the centralization and eventual malicious attacks on the community. But I guess we'll see.
Yeah, I think we'll see, right? Like if I would hope that Yuga, like, I don't understand the terms of the legal agreement they have. So I don't know, they say they give it to the community. I don't know what rights Yuga Labs maintains or whatnot. But it's a step in the right direction, right? Like it's kind of funny, things fall into the public domain all the time. It just takes like 100 or some years, thanks to like Walt Disney, like trying to protect the mouse for like a century. But things used to fall in the public domain way, way, way sooner, right? And I should actually look up how soon that they fall into the public domain. The idea is always that like your human output is partially thanks to the society around you. And eventually, whatever you do in your life eventually belongs to all of us, right? Which, the Bitcoiners probably is like, I just called the devil down upon us, right? But in most things, that's how it works. Like eventually it belongs to all of us. So I think them giving it to the people was the right move. It is a little bit weird that like Yuga Labs is now at the top of NFTs. And I hope that they, I've looked at that deck, their raise deck, that's been shared. I hope that it's just sometimes I worry, and Yuga Labs, please forgive me if you ever hear this the wrong way from me. But like, I hope that like the merger just didn't give like a bigger pipe to like the jugular of like the cash cow.
Yeah, right? The VCs, which have already began investing in it. And I think that was part of the concerns. And also the initial rollout of ApeCoin, you can tell that there's influence from Web2 companies and exchanges that are kind of governing the DAO and the coordinated listings. And they definitely put a lot of due diligence in it, but also means that there's both sides of the spectrum probably participating in this. So it just depends on if they could if they can maintain the driver's seat of this vehicle that they're driving.
As a small note, just because I'm a DAO like purist, their DAO isn't really a DAO yet. The way I understand it, it's like a multi-sig and a snapshot. So
with and the people who are on the DAO are all executives within crypto exchanges and large businesses already.
Yeah.
We'll see. I know.
I mean, PridePunk DAO may become a hot mess too. So like, I'm not going to throw stones in a glass shop, right?
Yeah, that's all we need is time to see. Dennison, thank you for joining me. This is awesome. My pleasure. I'm super excited about the project. I think the community is going to receive it really well. Hopefully it sparks the movement and helps some individuals in the NFT or crypto world find a community, because I think at the end of the day, that's what DAOs and NFTs and social tokens and all these other things that keep popping up is social capital before gaining monetary capital. At least that's how I see it.
Yeah.
How does everyone stay in touch with you or involved? Anything you like to mention?
Yes. The website, pridepunk.xyz, the Twitter, PridePunks 2018. Although if you go to the website, you'll see all the links. There's also the Discord there. The Discord is like popping off. It's wild. Join. Lots of sexy men on the beach. Gifts. It's a great place. It's awesome. So yeah, like we're going to try and get this mint done this week because I do have to go back to my normal life. But really excited to get this out there. So just hope people come and everything works. Once again, big disclaimer, I'm not a professional developer. Contracts are not audited. Use at your own risk. But everything is open and transparent so people can check and see everything.
That's how we'd like it in the Web3. Well, Dennison, thank you again. And everybody who made it this far, hopefully got on the rainbow list or sit around for the minting, because it is going to be quite an adventure for this historic NFT project. Thank you guys for listening and watching. We'll catch you next time.